The colony ship Dandelion was not a warship. It carried no weapons. It had no armor. It was painted in bright colors because children loved bright colors. And the Dandelion carried 2,400 human children. They came from every corner of Earth. Some were from small villages. Some were from great cities. They were between the ages of 6 and 14. And they had won a contest to travel across the stars. The program was called Seeds of Tomorrow. And it was meant to show young humans the beauty of the galaxy. Ambassador Una Park had fought for 5 years to make this program real. She believed that if children saw the wonders of space, they would grow up wanting peace instead of war. The children boarded the ship on a bright spring morning. Parents waved goodbye. Teachers smiled and promised to take good care of everyone. Dr. Hana Shin brought her twin daughters, Minji and Suji, who were 8 years old. They held hands as they walked up the ramp. Excited to see new worlds, Captain Minho Kang commanded the Dandelion. He was a gentleman who had requested this assignment because he loved children. His own daughters were among the passengers. He watched them run through the corridors with their friends, and he felt proud. This was the best mission of his career. The journey to New Busan would take 3 weeks. New Busan was a beautiful planet that humans had made green and alive. It had mountains and oceans, and forests filled with strange and wonderful animals. The children would spend 1 month there, learning and exploring, before returning home. They never arrived. The Velthari Dominion had watched humanity for 50 years. They were an old species. They had ruled their part of the galaxy for 8,000 years, and they did not like change. Humans were change. Humans spread too fast. They built too quickly. They made friends with too many other species. The Velthari saw humanity as a disease that would one day threaten their power. High Commander Vorath of the Velthari War Council made a decision. He would not wait for humanity to become strong. He would cut them down while they were still young. And what better way to break a species than to kill its children? The attack came without warning. The Dandelion was passing through empty space when 6 Velthari warships appeared. Captain Minho Kang sent an emergency message immediately. He begged them to stop. He told them the ship carried only children. He offered to surrender. He offered anything. The Velthari did not answer. They simply fired. The first blast tore through the engine room. The second destroyed the communication array. The third, fourth, and fifth ripped the ship apart, piece by piece. Captain Minho Kang died trying to reach his daughters. Dr. Hana Shin survived only because she was thrown into an escape pod by a young teacher named Jisoo, who did not make it herself. The attack lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, the Dandelion was nothing but burning metal and silence. Admiral Taesung Oh received the distress signal at 0347 hours. He was an old soldier with gray hair and tired eyes. He had fought in 3 wars and had seen terrible things, but nothing prepared him for what he found when his rescue ships arrived. Debris floated in the darkness of space. Small bodies drifted among the wreckage. Toys and books and little shoes tumbled slowly in the void. Admiral Taesung Oh stood on the bridge of his ship and watched, and something inside him went very quiet. His crew found Dr. Hana Shin in her escape pod. She was alive, but broken. She kept asking about her daughters. No one could answer her. They searched for 3 days. They found no other survivors. They counted the dead as best they could. 2,400 children. 847 adults. All gone. The news reached Earth like a wave of ice. At first, people did not believe it. It had to be a mistake. It had to be fake. But then, the images came. The lists of names came. The faces of smiling children appeared on every screen, and beneath each face was a single word: deceased. The world stopped. Schools closed. Factories went silent. Streets emptied. People gathered in public squares and stood together, saying nothing, holding candles and photographs. In Seoul, a mother collapsed in the street, screaming her son's name. In Busan, an old grandfather sat on a bench and wept until he could not breathe. In a small village in the mountains, a father walked into the forest and did not come back for 3 days. The galaxy watched and waited. They expected humans to do what young species always did. They expected anger, chaos, and division. They expected humanity to blame each other, to fight among themselves, to fall apart. The Velthari were pleased. High Commander Vorath told his council that the human threat was over. Kill their children, and you kill their future. It was simple mathematics. But humanity did not fall apart. Something strange began to happen. Political enemies stopped fighting. Countries that had hated each other for centuries sent messages of support. Rich people and poor people stood side by side. Old arguments were forgotten. Old wounds were ignored. The entire human species looked at the faces of 2,400 dead children and felt the same thing at the same time. President Ji Yun-bek addressed the galaxy. She was a small woman with a soft voice, but when she spoke, every human listened. She did not scream. She did not threaten. She simply said, "We will remember every name." The Galactic Council did not understand. The Velthari laughed. What could remembering names do? Names were just words. Words could not fight warships. They did not know that those 5 words were the most dangerous thing humanity had ever said. In military bases around the world, soldiers who had argued for years shook hands and began working together. In laboratories, scientists shared secrets they had guarded for decades. In shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, engineers looked at half-finished warships and started working faster. General Wonjin Ryu had spent 40 years telling people that war was wrong. He had believed in peace his whole life, but on the day he saw the list of dead children, he walked into the United Earth Military Command and spoke 5 words of his own. Tell me who did this. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. They thought killing human children would make humanity weak. Instead, it woke something ancient and powerful, something that had slept inside humanity since the first mother held her first child. The silence before the storm had ended, and the storm was coming. The Galactic Council met on the great station called Harmony Prime. Representatives from 47 species sat in a massive circular chamber, each in their own section, designed for their unique bodies. Some breathed oxygen. Some breathed methane. Some did not breathe at all. They had gathered to discuss what the Velthari had done. High Commander Vorath stood in the center of the chamber. He was tall and gray, with 4 arms and eyes that never blinked. He showed no shame. He showed no regret. He explained his actions as if he were discussing the weather. Humanity grows too fast, he said. In 200 years, they spread to 40 worlds. In another 200, they would spread to 400. We did what was necessary. We removed a threat before it could mature. Several representatives nodded slowly. The Kreeth, a species of traders, had lost business to human merchants. The Solari had watched humans befriend species that once traded only with them. Even those who found the attack distasteful could not deny that humanity made them nervous. They are young, said Vorath. They will mourn. They will fight among themselves about what to do. They will weaken. In 50 years, they will be nothing. This is how young species die. The council debated for 6 hours. In the end, they issued a statement of deep concern, but took no action. The Velthari Dominion was too powerful to challenge. Humanity was too young to matter. The mathematics seemed clear. Ambassador Unipark watched the proceedings through a screen on Earth. She had spent her life building bridges between species. She had believed that understanding could prevent war. Now, she watched 47 species decide that the murder of 2,400 children was acceptable, and something fundamental changed inside her. She walked out of her office and never returned. President Ji Yun-bek received reports from human colonies across the galaxy. What she read made her sit down slowly. On every world, humans were putting aside their differences. Labor unions and corporations signed emergency agreements. Political parties that had battled for decades announced they would work together. Religious leaders of every faith held joint services. Even criminal organizations went quiet. Her advisors did not understand. This unity cannot last, they said. Humans always fight. Give it a few weeks. But President Baek understood something her advisors did not. She called a meeting of every world leader, and she asked them one question. What do you feel? One. 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 The answers were the same. Everyone felt it. A cold, quiet thing that sat in their chest. It was not rage. Rage was hot and fast and burned itself out. This was different. This was deeper. It was the feeling of a parent who has lost a child and knows exactly who is responsible. We do not need to create unity, said President Baek. The Valthari have created it for us. In the memorial halls, people read names aloud. 2,400 names. They read them in the morning and at night. They read them in schools and in factories and in government buildings. Children who had never met the dead learned their names anyway. Minji, Suji, Dongyun, Yerin, Sojun, Nari, Jiwoo, Hyunsu. Every name was a promise. Every name was a weight that humanity would carry forever. Dr. Hana Shin left the hospital after 2 weeks. Her body had healed, but her heart had not. She had lost both daughters in 4 minutes. She had lost everything that made her life worth living. Some people would have broken. Some people would have given up. Hana Shin was not some people. She went to the Memorial Plaza in Seoul, where holographic images of all 2,400 children floated in the air. She found her daughters' faces and stood before them for a long time. Then she turned and saw Captain Minho Kang's brother, Junsu, standing nearby. He had lost his brother, his sister-in-law, and his 2 nieces in the attack. What do we do now? Junsu asked her. We make sure they are never forgotten, said Hana, and we make sure this never happens again. Those words spread across human space like fire. General Wonjin Ryu assembled the largest military council in human history. Officers who had competed against each other for promotions now shared information freely. Secrets that nations had guarded for centuries were placed on the table. The general looked at the combined strength of humanity and realized something remarkable. Humans had been preparing for war for their entire existence. They had never stopped building weapons, even in times of peace. They had never stopped training soldiers, even when there was no enemy. It was simply what humans did. They prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. Now the worst had happened, and humanity was ready. Admiral Tae Sung-oh took command of the fleet. He was the man who had found the wreckage of the Dandelion. He was the man who had seen the small bodies floating in space. Every night, he dreamed of those children. Every morning, he woke up and continued his work. We will not attack blindly, he told his officers. And when we do, the galaxy will understand what it means to harm human children. In laboratories across Earth, scientists worked without rest. Sora Yoon, a young linguist, was given access to every piece of Valthari communication humanity had ever recorded. She worked for 19 days straight, sleeping only when her body collapsed. On the 20th day, she walked into General Wonjin Ryu's office and placed a chip on his desk. I broke their codes, she said. All of them. Daeho Kwon was a physicist who had spent 10 years studying Valthari shield technology. He had always wanted to understand how it worked. Now he wanted to understand how to break it. 3 weeks after the attack, he found the answer. Eun-ji Im was a strategist who had written papers about alien military tactics. She had studied the Valthari for years, finding their patterns, their weaknesses, their blind spots. She created a plan so detailed that it predicted what the Velthari would do before they did it. The galaxy believed humanity was weak because they were young. They did not understand that young did not mean helpless. Young meant hungry. Young meant adaptable. Young meant willing to do whatever was necessary. The Velthari had killed 2,400 children and expected humanity to fall apart. Instead, they had given humanity something it had never had before, a single purpose that united every human alive. President Ji Yun-baek sent a second transmission to the Galactic Council. It was not a threat. It was not a plea. It was simply a countdown. "You have 30 days, she said. "Use them wisely." The countdown began, and the galaxy finally started to feel afraid. On the memorial world of Jeju Prime, 10,000 people gathered under an open sky. They came from every human colony. They came by shuttle and starship and transport vessel. They filled the green fields and stood among the flowers that had been planted in memory of the dead. Dr. Hana Shin stood on a simple wooden stage. She wore no uniform. She carried no weapon. She was just a mother who had lost her children, speaking to other mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters who had lost theirs. "The Velthari killed our children because they were afraid," she said. Her voice was quiet, but speakers carried it across the field. They looked at humanity and saw something that scared them. They saw a species that grows fast, a species that makes friends easily, a species that never stops reaching for more. She paused and looked at the crowd. Thousands of faces looked back at her. Some were crying, some were angry. All were listening. They thought killing our children would stop us. They thought we would break apart. They thought we would become weak. Hana's voice grew stronger. They were wrong. The crowd did not cheer. They did not shout. They simply nodded. The agreement was silent, but absolute. "They killed our children because they feared what humanity might become," said Hana. "Now let us show them they were right to be afraid." Those words marked the beginning of the gathering. In asteroid fields across human space, something extraordinary was revealed. For 10 years, humanity had been building ships in secret. Not trading vessels, not exploration craft. Warships, hundreds of them. They had been hidden in hollowed-out asteroids, powered down and waiting. Engineer Jiho Moon had led the project from the beginning. He was a small man with thick glasses and oil-stained hands. He had never fired a weapon in his life, but he had designed ships that could end civilizations. "We always knew this day might come," he told Admiral Taesung. "Oh, we hoped it would not, but we prepared anyway." The Exodus fleet consisted of 847 warships. The number was not an accident. There had been 847 adults killed alongside the children. Each ship was named after one of them. The flagship was called the Jisoo, named after the young teacher who had saved Dr. Hana Shin's life. Admiral Taesung-oh walked through the flagship and felt the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. He was 63 years old. He had dreamed of retiring to a quiet house by the sea. Now he commanded the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. "Do we have enough?" asked his second-in-command, Captain Salman Cha. "Enough ships?" "No," said the admiral. "The Velthari have 3 times our numbers, but we have something they do not." "What is that, sir?" "Every person on every ship is fighting for someone they loved. The Velthari are fighting because they were ordered to. That difference matters." Across the fleet, crews prepared for war. They were not professional soldiers. Many had never seen combat. They were engineers and teachers and doctors and farmers who had volunteered when they heard about the attack. They trained day and night, learning to fight, learning to work together, learning to become something more than they had been. On Earth, Sora Yoon continued her work. She had broken the Velthari communication codes, but that was just the beginning. Now she listened to their messages, learning their plans, their fears, their weaknesses. She discovered something important. They do not believe we will attack. she told General Wonjin Ryu. They think the countdown is a bluff. They think we are too weak. The general smiled for the first time in weeks. Good. Let them think that. Daeho Kwon finished his work on the shield disruptors. The devices were small enough to fit in a torpedo. When they hit a Velthari shield, they would turn the shield's own energy against itself. The Velthari had relied on their shields for 8,000 years. They had never imagined anyone could break them. Will it work? Asked Admiral Taesung. Oh, in testing, yes, said Daeho. In real combat, we will find out. That is not a confident answer. Admiral, I am a scientist. I do not give confident answers. I give honest ones. Eun-ji-im presented her battle plan to the War Council. It was detailed beyond anything they had seen before. Every Velthari fleet was marked. Every patrol route was mapped. Every weakness was identified. We do not attack their homeworld first, she explained. That is what they expect. Instead, we attack their pride, their outer colonies, their military stations. We show them that their territory is not safe. We show them that we can reach them anywhere. Captain Minho Kang's brother, Junsu, had joined the fleet as a ground commander. He had never been a soldier, but he had trained every day since the attack. He needed to do something. He needed to honor his brother's memory. What about civilians? He asked. Do we kill their families like they killed ours? Eun-ji-im looked at him with steady eyes. No, she said. We do not. Why not? Because we are not them. Because our children would not want us to become monsters. Because humanity's strength is not in cruelty. It is in something else. Junsu thought about his nieces. He thought about their smiles and their laughter and the way they had hugged him every time he visited. He thought about what they would want him to do. You are right, he said quietly. They would not want that. The countdown continued. 20 days left. Then 15. Then 10. The Galactic Council sent messages asking humanity to reconsider. They offered negotiations. They offered reparations. They offered to pressure the Velthari into apologizing. President Ji-yeon Baek responded with a single question. Will you bring our children back? The council had no answer. On the final day of the countdown, Admiral Taesung addressed the entire Exodus fleet. His face appeared on every screen, in every ship, across all of human space. Tomorrow, we go to war, he said. Some of us will not return. I cannot promise victory. I cannot promise safety. I can only promise this. We will fight with honor. We will not become the monsters they think we are. And no matter what happens, the galaxy will never forget what happens when you harm human children. He paused, and his old eyes filled with something fierce and bright. Remember their names, he said. All 2,400 of them. Carry them with you into battle. Let them be your strength. The fleet powered up. 847 ships began to move. The gathering was complete. The reckoning was about to begin. The Velthari Dominion had ruled their sector of the galaxy for 8,000 years. They had conquered dozens of species. They had built an empire that stretched across hundreds of star systems. They had never lost a war. They fell in 11 days. Admiral Taesung did not attack the way the Velthari expected. He did not charge toward their homeworld with guns blazing. He did not send threats or demands. He simply appeared where they did not expect him and broke things they thought could not be broken. The first target was a military station called Iron Gate. It protected the entrance to Velthari space and was considered impossible to attack. It had shields that could stop a small moon. It had weapons that could destroy entire fleets. It had 10,000 soldiers ready to fight. The Exodus fleet arrived at midnight, local time. The Velthari commanders laughed when they saw the human ships. They were outnumbered, 3-1. This would be easy. Then Daeho Kwan's shield disruptors hit. The Velthari shields flickered, twisted, and collapsed. Energy that was meant to protect the station instead tore through its systems. Lights went dark. Weapons went silent. The impossible fortress became helpless in seconds. Admiral Taesung-oh sent a message to the station commander. Surrender. And no one dies. Fight. And everyone dies. You have 60 seconds to decide. The commander surrendered in 30. Human soldiers boarded the station. They moved through the corridors with weapons ready, but they did not fire unless fired upon. They captured soldiers instead of killing them. They treated the wounded, even Velthari wounded. The station fell, without a single death on either side. The galaxy watched in confusion. This was not how war worked. This was not how young species behaved. Where was the rage? Where was the blood? The answer came from Captain Junsu Kang, who led the ground forces. A reporter asked him why they were showing mercy to the people who had killed human children. My nieces were 8 years old, said Junsu. They believed in kindness. They believed that people could be good. If I become a monster to avenge them, then I have betrayed everything they were. I will not do that. The Exodus fleet moved deeper into Velthari space. They struck military targets with impossible precision. They disabled warships instead of destroying them. They captured soldiers instead of killing them. They avoided civilian areas completely. High Commander Vorath could not understand what was happening. His intelligence reports said the humans were weak. His strategists said they would fight like animals. Instead, they fought like surgeons, cutting exactly where it hurt most. They are trying to humiliate us, he told his council. They want to show that they can beat us without effort. He was only half right. They did want to humiliate the Velthari. But it was not about ego. It was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. On the 8th day, the Exodus fleet reached the Velthari military headquarters. This was where High Commander Vorath had given the order to attack the Dandelion. This was where 2,400 death sentences had been signed. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Velthari fought hard, but their shields failed. Their communications were jammed, and their reinforcements never arrived. Sora Yun had intercepted every message. Unji Im had predicted every move. By the end, the great headquarters was surrounded and helpless. Admiral Taesung-oh offered the same terms he had offered everywhere else. Surrender and live. Fight and die. High Commander Vorath surrendered. The capture was broadcast across the galaxy. Trillions of beings watched as Velthari soldiers laid down their weapons and walked out with their hands raised. They watched as humans treated their enemies with respect, giving them food and medical care, following every rule of war that existed. Then came the trial. The Galactic Council expected humanity to execute the Velthari commanders. It was what any other species would have done. It was what the Velthari themselves would have done. But humanity had something different in mind. High Commander Vorath and his officers were brought to Jeju Prime, the memorial world. They were placed in a simple courtroom, surrounded not by soldiers, but by families. The families of the 2,400 children they had murdered. Dr. Hana Shin sat in the front row. Her eyes never left Vorath's face. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every piece of evidence was presented. Every decision was examined. The Velthari commanders were given lawyers and allowed to defend themselves. Everything was done properly, legally, fairly. In the end, there was no question of guilt. Vorath had ordered the attack. He had known the ship carried children. He had not cared. The court asked Dr. Hana Shin to speak before sentencing. She stood slowly and walked to the front of the room. She faced the being who had killed her daughters. "You wanted to end our future," she said quietly. "You looked at our children and saw a threat. You killed them because you were afraid of what they might become." She stepped closer. Vorath did not meet her eyes. "My daughters were named Minji and Suji. They were 8 years old. Minji wanted to be a doctor. Suji wanted to be a pilot. They will never grow up. They will never fall in love. They will never have children of their own. You took all of that from them. Her voice remained steady. No anger, no screaming, just truth. But you did not destroy our future. You united it. Every human alive now carries my daughter's names in their heart. They will be remembered forever, and you will spend the rest of your life building what you tried to destroy. The sentence was announced. The Velthari commanders would not be executed. They would not be imprisoned. They would be sent to every human colony to build schools. Schools named after each of the 2,400 children they had killed. They would build until they died, and then their children would continue the work. High Commander Voreth's face twisted with horror. Death would have been kinder. Death would have been easier. This was worse. This was living with what he had done, surrounded by the names of his victims, forever. The galaxy watched and finally understood. Humanity's power was not in their weapons. It was not in their rage. It was in their ability to turn tragedy into purpose, to transform grief into something that would outlast empires. The Velthari Dominion had murdered human children. Humanity had responded by making those children immortal. The Galactic Council demanded answers. They had watched humanity defeat an 8,000-year-old empire in 11 days. They had watched human soldiers show mercy to enemies who deserved none. They had watched a grieving mother sentence her children's killer to build schools instead of die. None of it made sense. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Chamber on Harmony Prime. This time, there was no Velthari representative. The Velthari Dominion still existed, but it was no longer a power. It was a broken thing, forced to pay for its crimes in the most human way possible. Ambassador Yuna Park stood in the center of the chamber. She was the same woman who had created the Seeds of Tomorrow program. She was the same woman who had watched the council ignore the murder of 2,400 children. But she was not the same. Something in her had hardened into steel. "You want to know how we won," she said. It was not a question. The representatives leaned forward. They had analyzed human ships, human weapons, human tactics. They had found nothing special. Human technology was average. Human soldiers were not superhuman. By every measure, humanity should have lost. "You studied our machines," said Yuna. "You studied our strategies. You counted our ships and calculated our firepower. And you found nothing that explains what happened." She walked slowly around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative. "That is because our true power is not in machines. It is not in weapons. It is not in numbers." She stopped in the center again. "Our true power is this. When you hurt one human, you hurt us all." The chamber was silent. "You think we are a young species. You think we are inexperienced, naive, easy to break. But you do not understand what makes us strong." Yuna's voice grew firm. "We carry our dead with us. Every name, every face, every child who will never grow old. They do not disappear when they die. They become part of us. They become our purpose." She pointed toward the viewing screen, where images of the 2,400 children slowly rotated. "You see dead children. We see 2,400 reasons to become something the galaxy has never seen. You thought killing them would weaken us. Instead, you made us unbreakable." "One." A Kreeth representative raised a tentacle. "But why show mercy? The Velthari killed your young. By all rights, you should have exterminated them." "By whose rights?" asked Yuna. "By the rights of species who kill to prove strength? We do not need to prove our strength. We know what we are. We know what we can do. We do not need to become monsters to show our power. We can show it by being better than our enemies." "But is that not weakness?" asked a Solari representative. Yuna smiled. But there was no warmth in it. "Weakness. You watched us dismantle an empire without committing a single atrocity. You watched us capture the beings who murdered our children and give them fair trials. You watched us sentence them to build schools instead of filling mass graves. And you call that weakness? She shook her head slowly. Any species can destroy. It takes no courage to kill, but to win completely, to have total power over your enemy, and then choose mercy. That requires a strength you cannot imagine. That is what terrifies you. Not our weapons, not our ships. The fact that we could have burned the Velthari homeworld to ash, and we chose not to. The chamber remained silent. The representatives looked at each other with new eyes. They had always seen humanity as a young species, loud and clumsy and easy to manipulate. Now, they saw something else, something ancient in a young body. Something that remembered every wound and every loss, and used that memory as fuel. Let me be clear, said Yuna. We do not want war. We never wanted war. Ambassador Park. The woman I was before she believed in peace. She believed that if we showed our children the beauty of the galaxy, they would grow up wanting friendship instead of conflict. Her voice cracked slightly, but she continued. The Velthari killed that dream along with those children. But they did not kill humanity's hope. They transformed it. Now, we carry a different message. We will reach out in friendship to any species that wants peace. We will trade fairly. We will help those in need. But we will never forget what happened. And any species that considers harming human children should remember what we did in 11 days. She turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. The schools the Velthari are building, they are open to everyone. Any species can send their children there. We will teach them about the 2,400. We will teach them about peace and war and the choices that define civilizations. And when those children grow up, they will carry those lessons with them. Yuna Park walked out of the chamber. Behind her, 47 species sat in silence, finally understanding what humanity truly was. 20 years passed. The Dandelion Memorial Academy on New Busan became the most famous school in the galaxy. Children from dozens of species studied there, learning side by side. They learned science and art and history. They learned about the 2,400 who had died. They learned about the war that followed and the mercy that ended it. On the 20th anniversary of the attack, a graduation ceremony was held. Thousands of students received their diplomas under a bright blue sky. Among them was a young woman named Yuri Kang. She was the niece of Captain Minho Kang and the great-niece of Junsu Kang, who had commanded ground forces during the war. Yuri wore a small pendant around her neck. Inside were the names of all 2,400 children, written in letters too small to read without magnification. She touched it as she walked across the stage. After the ceremony, she boarded a ship. She had been accepted into the Explorer Corps, following in her family's tradition. Her first mission would take her beyond the edges of known space, into regions no human had ever seen. As the ship rose through the atmosphere, Yuri looked out the window at the world below. She could see the schools the Velthari had built. She could see the memorial gardens where the names of the dead were carved in stone. She could see the future her uncle and aunt had died for. We remember, she whispered, touching her pendant. And we will never stop reaching for the stars. The ship broke through the clouds and entered the darkness of space. Behind it, a world full of children from 100 species learned about peace and loss, and the strange, unbreakable power of human memory. The galaxy had once asked what made humanity strong. Now they knew, and they would never forget.